Dr Lori Brotto of the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. And you're listening to the Health Report here on RN with me, Norman Swan. Lori Brotto is also studying a fascinating group of people who are basically asexual. And her starting point was that this was a problem.
Yeah, this is a fascinating area of study because these individuals, which by our best estimates represent probably 1 to 2% of the population, will say, I'm not interested in sexual activity. Nothing provokes sexual desire for me, yet it doesn't bother me in any way. And the only kind of semblance of bother or distress is that it bothers people around them. So society or partners or friends might say to the asexual individual, but don't you ever get sexually excited? Isn't there anything that ever turns you on?
Or you're really gay.
Or you're gay, or you're repressing something, or perhaps you were the victim of trauma as a child. Our group has explored many of those different possible explanations for asexuality, and we find that this is a very psychologically healthy, well-adjusted group of individuals. And this is likely not a sexual dysfunction.
So you've been just trying to find out more about them?
Yeah, so until now our research has largely been descriptive. So through a combination of large internet-based surveys as well as inviting asexuals into the lab where we can actually measure the sexual arousal response, we've been able to learn some really interesting findings.
So when you show them erotic videos, what happens?
So they show the same genital arousal response that those individuals who say that they have sexual interest show. So the conclusion there is that it's not a dysfunction in the plumbing, so to speak. It's not a dysfunction of sexual arousal. You
see something erotic, your body responds, but they're not interested.
They're not interested. They say that they would rather be watching, a boring documentary.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So what is it about them? What have you found?
So we've found that this condition is probably not a sexual dysfunction because there is no distress associated with their lack of desire. And it's caused our group to increasingly look at, well, could there be some sort of neurodevelopmental or congenital reasons that could account for the asexual orientation in the same way that there's very strong and conclusive evidence for those factors in homosexuality. So we've looked at some biomarkers such as looking at the ratio between the second and the fourth digit. We've looked at handedness. In other words, we know that gay individuals have a much higher prevalence of left-handedness compared to right-handedness. And we've looked at something interesting called the fraternal birth order effect, which is the finding that gay men have a much higher rate of having older brothers than age-matched straight men. And we're finding some of those same kinds of correlates among asexuals, starting to point to probably more a neurodevelopmental etiology to account for it.
So tell me more about this second finger, fourth finger ratio, because it's thought to be influenced by something in the womb, by the exposure to male hormones in the womb.
Yeah, so the finding is that the ratio between the second and the fourth digit significantly differs in gay men versus straight men. There's a similar finding among lesbian women versus straight women, although the differences don't tend to be as strong as you see in men.
And this is where the fourth finger is bigger than the second finger.
That's right. That's exactly right. And what we find among asexuals...
So we've got a whole audience now looking at their hand.
Well, here is where we need to pay attention to measurement issues, because there really is a science behind how you're measuring the distance between the base of the finger and the tip of the finger. And so for those viewers who are watching this, put the ruler away. You really need to see someone who's actually skilled in doing these kinds of measurements. So what we found among asexuals is that the ratio between the second and the fourth digit on their dominant hand resembled the ratio among the homosexual samples that have been widely published on in the past and significantly differed from heterosexual samples.
And so they show a similar pattern to homosexuality?
Exactly, yeah.
But they're not gay?
But they're not gay. They're not attracted to men or women.
What's going on?
We really don't know. Our research and the very preliminary research of others has been purely at a descriptive level, trying to characterize these individuals. And I think what we need to see more of is more kind of basic science research, perhaps doing some imaging data on these individuals, actually looking at the brains of these individuals while they're exposed to erotic films to see if the brains are actually registering the erotic content of the stimuli.
And you show them heterosexual erotic content or homosexual erotic content?
Yeah, so until now we've only shown heterosexual erotic content, although we know that for women, the kind of erotic stimuli that you show, be it heterosexual, homosexual, or even primates having sexual activity, really is irrelevant. Women will show the same level of genital arousal response.
It's profoundly disturbing.
Disturbing or very, very interesting that the genital arousal response is so automatic and so robust.
What about the lives of these people? What's happening in their lives?
Yeah.
Are they single? Are they partnered?
Yeah.
What's going on there?
Well, I think you see the same kind of variability among asexuals as you see among sexual individuals. You see some that will describe themselves as asexual romantic, which means that they desire the same kind of closeness and compatibility and long-term stability in a partnership that a sexual individual will, yet they have no desire for the sexual elements of that relationship. Yet you also find other subgroups of asexuals who will describe themselves as aromantic, so no desire for the sexual, and similarly no desire for any romantic attachment at all as well.
Do they marry each other?
There is a very large online asexuality community, and part of that website is devoted to matching. So it's a bit of a, an online dating website for asexuals. That's an ideal situation because it allows one to overcome all of the, the difficulties in having one asexual partnered with a sexual person. How do you negotiate sexual activity in those partnerships? But it does happen. It does happen that some asexuals do partner with sexual individuals.
That would be nice if they could find each other, because they could have an intimate companionship that might be actually undermined a little bit if there was an incompatibility between the two partners.
Yeah, that is ideal, although the typical story of the asexual individual is not one in which they wake up one day, early in their sexual development and say, oh, I'm an asexual. The more typical story is one in which the individual doesn't have any sexual feelings, yet they engage in many years of experimentation, testing out whether they might be attracted to men or women or other variants, etc. And so their observation that they are indeed asexual tends to happen much later on in life. Many of them will say that it is only upon finding this online asexual community that is the first time that they've identified with that label.
Never let it be said that I don't take you to interesting places. Lori Brotto is Associate Professor of Gynecology at the University of British Columbia.